Tom, what a momentous couple of days it's been for Munster. We'll obviously talk about the game last weekend, but first, you were at the homecoming on Monday night. Fill us in what it was like in Thomond.
Oh, the energy there, the vibe there was unbelievable. Like I came in at around 5 o'clock. Gates opened at 6, I think it was. Seeing all the people milling around, all the Munster jerseys, all the people arriving on buses, coming in cars. Just a great vibe. And once the event got started, the East Terrace was all full up. The North Terrace was, or the South Terrace rather, was around halfway full. Um, just a fantastic event. Just the music, the crowd, people singing stand up and fight, fields of that and right. When the players came out to Zombie, just really, really good. Just the atmosphere, the joy that was there, really, really good. And I think that it reflects just how special a tournament win this actually was for Munster. Just the outpouring, and not just at this event on Monday, which I think they sold out in under 24 hours. They had to limit it at 9,000 people for operating. They didn't have the staff at short notice to do it. Um, they could have got 10, 15, like who knows how many thousand people would have come with a bit more notice. Look, it is what it is. There's World Cup camps coming up and travel arrangements and stuff. But yeah, it just was. It's been amazing since Saturday. The energy that's been out there. It feels like the old days again.
As an avid Munster follower, what was it like for you on Saturday to see what Munster did to beat the Stormers, and almost the drama of the way Munster did it as well, like this run they've been on the last couple of games away from home, churning out big results. But when that final whistle went, when that buzzer sounded, what did it feel like, Tom?
Just the emotion of it, like it's been a long time. I've been doing like Three-Way Kings for 8 years. I've been doing it professionally for around 4 or 5 years, where you're living every week, every game. You're not kicking every ball, but you're thereabouts. And and other supporters have been the same. Where they've been and they've traveled to these games. You're losing semi-finals, you're losing finals. You're having disappointing ends to season, like last year, for example. But there's always something. There's always a moment there to keep you coming back. And when you look at this playoff run that they had, I don't think this end of the season will be duplicated anywhere in any tournament in this sport, with the difficulty level that was there. People go on about the European Cup and it's just the league. I don't buy that at all. You look at the difficulty of Munster's end to the season, where you're going down to Cape Town to play the Stormers. They had never been, like, they had been beaten in 18 months in that stadium up to that point. Munster beat them, ended that streak. Next week you're playing in Durban, where Munster had been hockeyed a few weeks prior. Gave up a big 20-something point lead, came back, should have won that game at the end, but drew it. Then going away to Glasgow, they haven't been beaten at home in a year and a half as well, something like that. Munster beat them. Leinster haven't lost in the Aviva since 2021 against Saracens. Munster beat them there too for the first time in God only knows how long. And then you're going away back to the Stormers again, winning it half a world away. With 5 minutes to go, that's about as good as it gets. And when you talk about difficulty, you talk about credible wins. That's how you go about doing it the hard way. Munster did it the hard way. They're the kings of the hard way, always have been. And like Graham Rowntree said last night, he said we'll probably find a more difficult way to win it next year.
Oh, it's incredible. Like what you've just outlined there, the chronology of what Munster have gone through the last couple of weeks, it just puts this win into perspective. And what strengthens the connection, I suppose, for you and for our listeners as well, is that West Cork element in the Munster team. And you've spoken about in this podcast so many times, Tom, and you've written about it in the Southern Star. There's such a strong group of West Cork men with Munster right now, and they played such a huge part in that win against the Stormers on Saturday. I want to go first to the Rock, the man from Oscarbury, John Hardman, with that incredible winning try just a couple of minutes from the end. Hopefully, we're recording this before the Ireland training camp is being announced later on Tuesday. If he's not in, cue the outrage right now. But if he is, so well deserved the form he's been in. But talk to us a bit about John Hodnett.
John Hodnett is a guy who I kind of became aware of, I'd say maybe 4 years ago, coming up through Clon. Like a lot of the players who come in to the Munster system come in through schools, come in through the likes of Prez, Christians, Munchins up in Limerick, all these different schools. John Hodnett was different. He didn't come through that pathway. And you heard he was good. I think they tried to move him to hooker. Wasn't interested in that. So went about going it the harder way, which is to go into the back row. Now, he was a talented player. You hear all about John Hodnett, serious player. But you hear that a lot about different guys. He just kept going though, kept showing up. Irish under 20s, was a standout player there. And this was in a year where everybody expected Scott Penny coming out of St. Michael's to be the standout guy in that Ireland back row. It wasn't. It was John Hodnett. And he went on then, got into the Munster Academy. And I think I was there for his debut. I think it was against the Southern Kings in Musgrave Park back in the old Pro 12, Pro 14. And he was just electric. And one thing always stands out in my mind about John Hodnett was when Munster, I think it was last season, ended up with a ton of guys getting stuck in South Africa and a ton of guys who were unable to play and all this other stuff. John Hodnett was listed as injured coming into that week. When that team sheet was announced ahead of that Wasps game on the Thursday or Friday, when John Hodnett's name showed up on that team sheet, my social media mentions went through the roof of people ecstatic that this guy was in playing. And his performances this season have been at the highest standards. And you talk about the star of the show last night in the homecoming, John Hodnett going around the place. Just the energy, the vibe, everything about this guy is screaming top player at Munster for many, many years to come, injury allowing. His performance levels in the last couple of weeks have been superb, to the point that when R.G. Sneeman was left on the bench for this game, we knew he was going to play a big impact in the second half. RG, it turned out was for most of the game, but that meant that John Hodnett would be starting. That's the level of performance that he's at the moment, where we're not just talking about a guy who scores a big try, but the overall quality of his game, his defensive output. Like, he won the Ironman or whatever it was, basically the top tackler in the URC this season. He has just been so consistently good. And I think a lot of the stuff, because earlier in the season, I took a bit of flack on social media because I was talking about how a guy like Scott Penny can get called up to the Ireland squad for the Six Nations. And he's a guy who's typically wearing a tracksuit when the big day comes around for Leinster. But John Hodnett, who's been playing outstandingly well against the likes of Toulouse, against the likes of Northampton, big games, nowhere to be seen when it comes to an Irish jersey. I felt that wasn't right. You look at the run that John Hodnett has been on since the end of the season, or since coming up to the end of the season, a serious player who's been playing really, really well. And whatever about Ireland, I think Keith Earl said it best last night about winning things from Munster is very special. I look at how well John Hodnett is playing and how well he's going, and what a big role even he had last night. Like the crack that was there with him last night at that homecoming. He is set to be a cult hero at Munster for many years, I feel.
That's brilliant. And Ross Garbury was proud as punch on Saturday night. I was getting texts from all around. Everyone was delighted with what he did. But there's so many more West Cork fellas. And let's look at Jack Crowley for a second. What a 12 months Tom this Shannon man has had. Obviously came up through the ranks of Bandon Rugby Club and Bandon Grammar. But where he was 12 months ago to where he is now, bringing all the Ireland action as well. This fella is as cool as they get, isn't he?
Oh, ice cold. You look at his last 2 or 3 games, I thought he was very, very good against Glasgow also. But he's been on a fantastic run since he's kind of taken over that 10 jersey since, I think it was the Sharks away game. He was a bright spot in that game. Then he's gone on such a run where he has been so good and so emphatic in his performances, where you never doubt this guy. The Leinster game with the drop goal in the last 5 minutes of the game. There are so many guys who don't even think to put themselves into that spot. With all the history, all the times Munster have lost to Leinster in the Aviva Stadium, all the season that was riding on it up to that point, he wanted that moment. And like he said at the homecoming last night, that kind of Craig Casey said to him, "Do you want it?" Because Munster were 2 points down. He was just like, "Yeah." And he stood back into the pocket, nailed it. And that's the sort of moment that stands to a player, because when you're a 10, you basically you build yourself on the back of moments where it's never just, oh, I'm just a top player now. You just build and build and build. And what Jack Crowley has been doing this season is adding so much credibility, so much authority to his game, where you don't think for a second that this guy is going to make a mistake, or if he does, that he's not capable of just getting back up and it doesn't matter. He'll nail the next moment. And then he does. And like he's still very young. Like he's 23. We look at the authority that he played this game with, where he was the quality of his passing, his running. But we go back to the moments where it was all on the line. You know, Munster had gone 3 points up with that try by John Hardman. Jack Crowley, if he makes the conversion, means that the Stormers have to score a try. They don't just have to play for a penalty to take it to extra time or whatever else. He has to nail the conversion. It's from the far left touchline for a right-footed kicker, and he drains it. Like, these are big moments for players where if those moments go, maybe he misses that kick, maybe it goes elsewhere. Those are big knocks for players, and they have to recover from. But when you look at what Jack Crowley has done in the last 2 or 3 weeks, that drop goal moment followed up by this moment. This is a player who's playing with incredible momentum. And when you have a 10 who's playing with that level of confidence, like that, pushes them on to be very, very serious players. And that's where Jack Crowley, the conversation isn't him now. Like, this guy is turning into a top player. There's an awful lot of hype around 10s in Ireland where lads look to, Sam Prendergast is being talked about. Oh, he needs to go to the World Cup. This is after one game, pro senior game against the Lions, worst team in South Africa. And like, when you look at Jack Crowley, he's in the Irish conversation at the moment. I'd be surprised if he wasn't in this group coming up for the World Cup. But you can only look at the future with Jack Crowley, how well he's playing, and all the moments he's hit along the way this season, that when you look back at the careers of the very, very best out-halves who are currently playing at the moment, they've all hit similar markers. Like, a lot of what he's done this season reminds me a lot of Owen Farrell. When you look at what Owen Farrell achieved at 22, 23, Jack Crowley is now doing the same. That's a great marker for the future, because like, this is what it is when it like is in. He's won it now, but everybody's kind of talking about how good can this guy be. The sky is the limit.
That's incredible. Like you said, the sky's the limit for Jack, and the sky's also the limit, you could say, for Gavin Combs. What another stellar season this Gib juggernaut has had. I think he was he the top try scorer in the URC as well, Tom. He's just like, the stats behind this man are incredible, but his performances too, like, he's just a beast on the field.
Yeah, LeBlanc, Gavin Combs. Yeah, like, as in Gavin Combs is, and a lot of this, there was a lot of nonsense that was talking about Gavin Combs over the last couple of months after the Irish kind of November, the Emerging Ireland Tour, the A games, and all this other stuff, where I think he took a lot of unfair flack off the back of that game, certainly in the media or whatever else. But when I look at how his game has progressed this season, I think there's a lot of people who misunderstand what Gavin Combs does. For me, like, the comparisons to Caelan Doris they're two very different players. The way they approach the game is very different. I look at Gavin Combs as being a guy who plays in a lot of ways almost like a second row, but he's wearing number 8 in his back. His all-around game has just improved and really pushed on. Like, he's always a guy who's dangerous from a couple of meters out, but the quality of his game, his overall game, his breakdown work, offensively and defensively, but offensively primarily, his work rate's gone through the roof. Like, he's a guy who, like, when you look at how well he's been performing, how well he's been showing up with regards to his all-around game, how complete as a player he is now, like, that's a guy who I think he'd be starting for most other test sides so I would say in the world. I would say he's up there. Like, you look at how credible he's been, how, like, the big moments he shows up with here, where like he gets that charge down on Manny Libok, that sets up the winning score. But he had so much more in this game as well, and all through the season, where he's showing up with big moment after big moment after big moment for 80 minutes. Like, he's a guy who reminds me at the moment very much of Dwayne Vermeulen. If you look at Dwayne Vermeulen back in and around coming into his peak years, Gavin Combs reminds me an awful lot of him. Like, I think Combs is a guy who is set to have a very big year yet. I think he'll like, a guy like him would be very valuable come the World Cup. I feel he will be in that conversation. But just how well he's developed on this year, just one of Munster's best players, and finishes the season as a champion. So I don't think anybody can take away anything from Gavin Combs. how well he's been playing, because honestly, he is one of the most important players in the Munster setup on field, but you see how big a character he is off the field as well. This all sets it up. Like, he is the Don of the West Cork Mafia, as far as I'm concerned. He is, after a fantastic season.
Talking about the West Cork Mafia, the Witcheries were down in Cape Town as well. And one of my favourite photos, Tom, was at the end when Josh and Fineen were celebrating together. You could see what it meant to them. It was etched right across their face. But for Josh to come on a big game like that and hold his own again, like he's another fellow who's coming on leaps and bounds.
He has. Like, I felt honestly at the start of the season that Josh had kind of plateaued a small bit. After a really good kind of, he had a couple of good moments in the previous few seasons. The way he's pushed on in the second half of the season has been fantastic. Really, really good. The quality of his handling. He's a really adaptive scrummager as well. His breakdown work as well. Like, just vicious. Like, really, really good, brutal. The kind of exact thing you want from your props. I thought he's been really, really good as the season has kind of come in. He's more than earned that spot in the rotation for loosehead prop during big games, and that's only going to continue. Like, he's only going to build on his physique and his engine as a player over the preseason. He's looked really, really good. And Fineen, I was saying on my own podcast there before this game at the weekend that if Fineen Wycherley was to miss out, he'd be incredibly unlucky. He has been one of my top performers in the last couple of weeks for Munster since he's come back from that. I think he had a shoulder injury that kept him out for a good lot of time in this season. Since he's come back from that, after getting his feet under him, he has looked absolutely unbelievably good. Really, like, he's looked like he's added on a little bit of extra size. He's battering fellas in collisions. Again, his breakdown work, his defense are really good. I felt he was so unlucky to miss out. Munster had to go with a 5-3. I think if Munster go to a 6-2 bench for that final, Fineen's coming on. Like, he'd be on the bench and he would have been coming on. Like, he was honestly, like, is in one of the best players Munster had towards the end of that run. And he seems to be at the moment now where he is kind of hitting that perfect, because I think I've written about in the Examiner as well, or the Star rather, about how, like, he is a guy who needs to find a role set that best suits what he does. And he's found it, I think, with what he's done over the last couple of weeks. And like, just and same with all of these guys. Like, I'm from Ballineen. So to see all these guys from Rosscarbery, Inishannon only over the road, Bantry only over the road, from my father be playing music in the hotels. When I see the Gavin Combs from Skibbereen, all these lads playing such a huge role in Munster winning a trophy. That's what it's all about. Like, it brings it so close to home for the people of West Cork to see these people and go like Rosscarbery, Skib. These are players now who are playing at the very highest level. It's really great for rugby in the region. And
it's going to be a great note to finish on. That was actually your preempt to my final question, Tom. But what a boost it is for rugby in West Cork. We've been on this incredible journey the last number of years. Go back to when Darren Sweetnam kind of kicked it all off, but the current gang are really driving it now. But to see these medals coming back to West Cork, and you listed off where these lads are from Bantry to Inishannon to Rosscarbery, and you've done the likes of Liam Coombs and Keane Hurley and these fellas as well, all involved. Like, what this does for rugby, it just boosts the profile in West Cork, and it just gives it that injection again.
Oh yeah, look at Keane Hurley. He's the next guy. He's got a senior contract at Munster next year. I think he's a really, really good player as well. Like, you look at the how local all these guys are. And I think that, you look at how popular the likes of John Hodnett was in this homecoming yesterday, and same with Gavin Combs. These are not bit part players. Like, these are not guys who are just coming on and doing a job every now and then. These are big players making big moments in the biggest games for Munster. And these guys have been performing all season long. So if you're a young player, a young guy a young player, even male or female in West Cork, who's playing rugby, you look at these guys and you look at a John Hodnett, you look at a Gavin Combs, and you're thinking, why can't I do what they do? There's no reason why you can't. And I think that's the biggest thing that you could take out of it, is that you see that trophy coming down around West Cork, which I'm sure it will, and just the inspiration of it to go, yeah, look, I can go on and do these things. There's no reason why. I know it takes an hour or 2 hours to get, here and back to go to different trainings or whatever else. But these guys show you what's possible. And that's the best thing about this, I think, for me, from a West Cork perspective, is that it shows that there's no limits on what you can be thinking as a young player in West Cork. You should never limit yourself, because these guys have shown that you can go to the highest level and then win trophies for Munster, which I think is just the most special thing going.